The first shortcut that we'll be looking at is the control plus arrow keys shortcut. Arrow keys can be up, left, right, or down. This shortcut helps you jump to the last cell of your continuous data. So, for example, if you are on this cell and if you wanted to go to the bottom of your data, you could simply press Control and down arrow. Why down arrow? Because you want to go down, right? So you can use Control plus down arrow to go to the last cell of your continuous data. Now, this word continuous is really important. What it actually means, what continuous data actually means, is that if you want to go from this cell to the last cell, all the cells in the middle should be having some or the other kind of data. Basically, it should be not empty. They should be having some kind of data, be it number, text, exclamation marks, hashtags, anything, but just have some value inside it. If it is not the case, the data will not be continuous. It will be a non continuous data. Let's look at a practical example of it. So I'll jump back to my COVID data worksheet, come back here to my patient number. Now, also reduce the row height. Yeah. Now, I want to go to the last cell of this column. I want to know where my data ends. So for that, I can simply hold Control and press the down arrow to go to the last cell, which tells me that, okay, my data is still 6726th row. If I want to come back to the top, I can simply again hold Control up arrow and come to the top. If I want to go to the top right part of my data, that is this type of transmission cell, I can simply hold Control and hit right. If I want to come back to the bottom of that particular column, Control down, come back to the top, Control up, and you get the drill. Now, what if the data wasn't continuous? So right now we have data for each and every patient in form of patient number. But what if one of the patients did not have the patient number? So for example, let's say I want to delete this cell. So right now we do not have the data for this patient. The patient number 7 is not there for some reason. Now if I go to the top and do the same, that is control down, I will get stopped here, that is at this cell. Why do I get stopped here? Because the next cell is empty. Excel has its own brain. What Excel thinks right now with its brain is that the next cell is empty. So probably our data ended one cell before it. It does not know that we have data lying after it. It will simply assume that because our data ended here, we have to stop here. That is one cell before it, because that's where our data ended according to Excel. But that is not really the case. So now, if I want to skip this empty part, if I want to go to 8, skip the empty cell, I have to again hold control down arrow and it will skip the empty cells, go to the next part of your continuous data. Now I can again do control down arrow to go to the bottom. If I want to come back to the top, the same logic applies. If I do control up arrow, Excel will stop here. That is one cell before the empty cell, thinking that the data ended on this cell. So if you want to skip this, again control up arrow to skip that empty cell and go to the next part of your continuous data, and then again control up arrow to go to the top. Now this also applies to multiple empty cells. So for example, if I did not have these three cells data, okay, and right now it was empty. If I held control and press the down arrow, I would stop here as expected. But again, if I do control down arrow, I will skip all these three cells. So the control down arrow is not moving one empty cell after one empty cell. It will skip all the empty cells that are there together. If I am on the fourth number here, that is the fifth row, control down arrow will bring me to 8 and not to this cell. That's how control plus arrow navigation shortcut works. It helps you jump from one cell to another cell, provided you have continuous data in between. Looking at the next shortcut that we have, which is the control shift arrow keys. So shift is the new key that is added to the previous shortcut. Using shift helps you select everything along your way as you move from one end to another. So in the same example that we had earlier, if I want to move from the first cell to the last cell, but at the same time, I want to select everything along my way. So from the first cell to the last cell, select everything in the middle. If that is the case, if that is the requirement, you need to use shift along with control and arrow key. So coming back to our COVID data, let's fill up these cells again. So you have 5, 6, and 7. Again, if you want to go to the bottom part of your data, control down arrow would work. But what if you want to select the entire column's data? How do you do that? You use control down arrow, but also shift along with it. So it is control shift down arrow. Shift is the key that is used in Excel to make any kinds of selections. So I can do control shift down arrow, and now I reach to the end of my data in that column, but also select everything on my way. Coming back to the top, if I want to select the entire first row of headers, I can do control shift right arrow. And that's how control shift and arrow keys work. They are to be used when you want to go to another end of your data, but select everything along your way. Now, coming to the third shortcut, which is control plus A. A here stands for all. So basically, you are trying to select your entire continuous data. Remember, again, it is continuous data. So here, if you are on this cell, if you press Control A, your entire data gets selected. Coming back to our worksheet, let's say I am on this cell and I press Control A. Entire data is selected here. I'm on this cell, Control A. Again, entire data is selected. As long as your data is next to each other, that is, your data is continuous, everything will get selected. You can notice that Excel wasn't the cell that was selected. So if I again press Control A, your data selection ends here. Why is that the case? Because between type of transmission column and Excel's cell, we have two empty columns. So our data is not continuous. Because it is not continuous, if I press Control A, Excel doesn't realize that this is also part of your data. So it stops here because the next two columns are completely empty. If I had some data here, even if one cell was filled, that would be counted. So if I had Excel written here, and if I went to any cell in my data and press Control A, now that column will also get selected. Why? Because one of the cells has some data. Okay, so that's how Control plus A works. A is actually just a short form of all. So it's Control all. Okay, so that is all your data. Coming to the last shortcut for navigation is the Control plus page up or page down, which basically helps you move from one sheet to another. So coming to our data, if I want to go to another sheet, that is other details, I can simply press Control page down. Now, remember this as kind of like a waterfall, which is going downstream. So waterfalls, obviously, the water is flowing down from a cliff or from a mountain somewhere. Okay. So if you're going from left to right, think of it as a waterfall. So you're going downwards. Because you're going downwards, the shortcut for it will be page down. Okay. So it will be control page down to go to the next sheet. If you're coming up, you're going back to the origins. That is the first sheet. You will have to press control page up. Okay, so to your left, if you're going, it's page up along with control. To your right, it is page down along with control. So for example, if I had multiple sheets here, like this, if I wanted to go to the next sheet, control page down again, and we'll go to the next sheet. This shortcut helps you move from one sheet to another, one sheet at a time. If you want to go back to the previous sheet, it's control page up. Simple. I hope everyone has understood these navigation shortcuts. These are fairly simple, fairly common, but trust me, it saves you a lot of time when you use navigation shortcuts instead of using scroll bars or your down arrow keys. So that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.